Hello, everyone. This is Tim's Truth, and I am Tim Moynihan, speaking to you today about the tragic occurrence in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when a young man was killed by accident after a police officer, a woman, Officer Kim Potter, intended to pull her taser to tase him and instead pulled her revolver and shot him and terribly and tragically caused his death. I think it's important. I'm going to call this truth that I'm delivering to you today, I'm going to call it the death of due process, because the reaction to this accident was, by this time in America, it was expected. It was predictable. So, and of course, the usual suspects came forward. Democratic Representative Tlaib instantly responded with, "This was no accident. This was murder. The police must not only be defunded, they must be abolished. This is government-sanctioned murder." And if Tim has any truth to deliver to you today, it is that that is a horrible distortion. It is an exploitation of people who are being led into divisiveness, into fears and hatreds that have no basis in reality. So let's just examine briefly what did happen. The young man was stopped, as best as I have been able to discern. He was stopped because of his faulty license plate. Perhaps it was unregistered. I think there might have been a warrant out for him. Last I read, that wasn't verified. But the officer had a reason to stop. Why, oh why, couldn't it just have been a stop and a check and a cooperation? So this is a hard time to fault somebody who was killed because of such a tragic accident. But when, oh when, is the community going to learn that cooperation with reasonable police conduct is not to be suspect and not to be confrontational? That's got to be part of the lesson that goes here, and part of the lesson that is conveyed here and goes back to the community. So the confrontation was precipitated by the conduct of the young man. Of course, that doesn't lessen our heartfelt sympathy, our brokenheartedness for the family, for the young 20-year-old man who lost his life, which it can never be repaired or restored. But it's an important fact, and it ought not to be lost in the hullabaloo that follows the inciting, the insightful, incendiary words of Democratic Representative Tlaib. She is to be excoriated. She ought to be excluded from private company or private counsel. She is a reprehensible example of hatred and exploitation. That's a point well made, and it ought to be noted, and we ought to form that opinion solidly on the basis of evidence. Now, accidents happen all the time. That doesn't mean they can be excused. They have to be investigated. There has to be an examination of all of the facts, but there must be due process, or else we're not America. There must be law and order. The reaction must not be rioting in the streets. If, for example, just play a thought experiment with me. Watch and keep track of, we won't be able to do it, but I wish somebody could do it for us, the next 72 hours in America, just as by way of example. And then note, make a list of all the tragedies that occurred because of an accident, because of a momentary inattention to detail, a carelessness, a negligence, but not intentional, not on purpose. Just accidents are part of the human condition. We are fallible. We practice, we rehearse, we prepare, and still we make mistakes. And sometimes the mistakes are so consequential they take our breath away, and they leave us grieving and mourning. So should we mourn? Yes. But my point with Tim's Truth today is that this should be an occasion for healing, not recrimination, for mending, not accusations. If the process was to work as it would in a sane society, no one, let alone me, is claiming this society is sane today. But if the process were to work, there would be a gathering of reasonable people, not easy these days, and they would examine the facts. And when they ascertain that it was an accident, they would consider taking this out of the criminal justice system, putting it into an alternative sort of resolution process called restorative justice. Restorative justice is being practiced eminently and successfully in New Zealand, for example. It hasn't taken hold in the United States. And with the race baiters and the race haters and the race hustlers, it's a very tough task to imagine it will be done in this case. But ideally, there would be a reconciliation. There would be not a resort to the criminal justice system, in effect forcing this police officer to plead not guilty, and then all of the hullabaloo of a trial and the confrontation and the hurt feelings, let alone the rioting and the looting, which has no rational basis, no connection to what occurred, but is another excuse to create division and to pit black against white, man against man, and woman against woman, and so forth. Anyway, in this process of reconciliation, there would be a restoration. There would be an accountability. There might even be a point where we could see that there ought to be a mutual accountability. When we Americans get to the point where we can call for a mutual accountability, hold the police to the highest standards, and think not less insultingly of the community as those who are not mature enough or independent enough to be accountable for what they do and what they don't do. When we get to the point where we can have mutual accountability, we can have a resolution of our differences humanely and in unity. This is an opportunity to create a situation where the police mourn equally with the community, where they express their heartfelt sympathy to the family for a tragic accident, and where the family, if not immediately, but over the long term and in the process of understanding and appreciating the underlying facts, might even forgive. And therein lies health, in forgiveness and accountability and the values and principles that have inspired Americans for generation upon generation. There is healing. Let there be healing. That's Tim's Truth. And that's what I have to say to you today. Thank you for joining me.